So our speaker today is Jen Miller. Jen Miller is a writer and a runner based in Southern New Jersey. She is the author of Running, a love story, and also writes the weekly New York Times running newsletter. And so Jen will be speaking with us, and as we've been doing for the last few meetings that we've been running virtually. If you have a question for Jen, please put it in the chat box. I will be monitoring them and I will be relaying the questions to Jen. So Jen, thank you so much for coming to speak with us, and please, tell us about yourself and your journey as a runner and writer.
Oh, they're intertwined. Hi. The reason I keep looking over here is because there are my kitchen windows and there's like a big storm happening out here. So got distracted by it because I'm 12. Hi, I'm Jen A. Miller. Jennifer Miller is somebody different who writes for the New York Times. I am the author of the book. Always have a prop ready if you're going to do a call. And I'm a member of the New York Times Running Club, which is our actual club. So when I run the New York City Marathon, I run for this. And our shirts are these really great versions of the Times logo with the runner on the back. These are our shirts for this year, which obviously we're not, we do media challenge races in Central Park once a month in the summer with other media outlets like HBO. Their shirts were Game of Thrones and we kicked their asses. So obviously it's not happening this year. Excuse me. I live in Southern New Jersey. I've always lived here pretty much my whole life, and this is where I became a runner. I grew up playing softball, basketball, soccer, and I was definitely one of those people who, we made fun of the runners because, what are they doing? That's not a real sport. And so I'm 40, so this was the mid-90s. Running definitely wasn't what it was. I just saw it as, white dudes in tube socks in rich towns running around. We played real sports where we hit everybody. But then I went to college, and I went to college in Florida, and I decided I didn't want to play sports anymore because of boys and school, allegedly. And it was the first time in my life where I was not physically active. And I tried to run a couple times in Tampa, Florida at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you're not getting drenched by a downpour at that time of the day, you're sweating you're just sweating everywhere. So that didn't quite work. I came back to Southern New Jersey to go to graduate school at Rutgers University Camden. Not in journalism. I do not have a journalism degree. I have a BA and an MA in English because I don't speak it good. And so at that point, I thought I was going to be an English professor because that seemed a safe route. And then I started writing op-ed commentary pieces for the Philadelphia Inquirer, which is my hometown newspaper, which I'd been reading since I was 7 years old, and decided, hey, if I do this, they pay me, and then more people will read it than will ever read anything I ever wrote about Shakespeare's dramas in an academic journal. So I got a job doing marketing for the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, PR, more marketing and PR separate at the hospital. I still know that even though it's been a while. So anytime that you read that researchers have found that blah, 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 I was the person who would go out and interview the researcher. I would get their journal paper and I would open up a medical dictionary because I'm old. So it was an actual dictionary that I opened and interpret these results and interview the researcher and then write up a press release, which then would go out to the media. And at the same time, I was freelancing on the side, writing about things that I really enjoyed, like vintage shopping, my mom. I wrote a piece about my grandmother's vintage coat, which I really liked, and just stuff to do around South Jersey. I spent all my summers as a kid down at the Jersey Shore, and I realized that a lot of publications wanted somebody who actually was from the area to write about it for a national audience, so I started doing that. And so one of the assignments I got was to run a 5K, and the angle was that I hated running and that I would do it with an online running coach, which at the time was not really, it was a brand new thing. That was the thing. It would be funny and it'd be this new technology. Can somebody coach you through a portal? And I hate it, so it'll be funny. And I trained, I think, for 8 weeks. I ran a 22:12, and I won a mug and a $5 gift certificate for a place called Macho Taco, where the tacos were $6. So that was my entryway into running, and that was in 2006. And the best thing about if you write a book about your running life is you can fact check it, because I just checked it before I talked to you, and I believe it was 2006. 2006, there you go. All of these chapters start with me running the 2013 New Jersey Marathon, and then goes back to a race that moves forward. So then we're at 2006. I was dating a terrible person who dumped me. He left me for someone who he said was younger and hotter. He was older than me, I should say. And then when he did it, he held my hand and said, but I'll keep you in the top 8 of my MySpace friends. Yeah, I see. Yeah, when I do this talk in person, I will actually go grab someone's hand. With permission, I won't just go grab a person, and I'll look them deep in the eyes, and it's just like, the people who get it, get it. And then in quick succession, my grandfather died. I bought a house, and then the recession hit, and I lost half my clients because I was freelancing full time. And I correlate this to today, because I, like many people, decided to just start running a lot to deal with the stress. It was before the Affordable Care Act. I had health insurance. It was extremely expensive, did not cover mental health services. So I ran my first 10-mile race. And I say that relates to today because Women's Running just had a piece come out that my editors and I just discussed that I think it was Brooks, On Running, and Hoka said their sales have doubled or tripled in the last couple months. So I think that we're going to be writing a piece about that for people who want to run now or want to come back to running, and like all of our usual advice on how to be a new runner, not all of it, some of it, like walk on a treadmill. Well, gyms are closed. Sign up for a race. I think we're going to do a story about that. Anyway, so I ran my first 10-mile race, and it was the Ocean Drive 10-miler, which started in Cape May, New Jersey, and finished on the boardwalk in North Wildwood. And then there was a marathon version that went all the way to Sea Isle. This is Southern Jersey Shore. And so I was at the starting line, and I was nervous as all heck, and I planned to run, walk, run. And there was a woman next to me, because the 10-milers and the marathoners all started at the same time. It was a very small race next to the ocean at the end of March. Like, it was brutal. I've been in it. It was in your face winds the whole time. It snowed once or twice. Like, it was a brutal race. And so, I had a bib, or different color bibs for 10 miles and marathon. And I saw she had a marathon bib, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I said, is this your first one? And she said, no, it's my 10th. And I'm like, this lady is like, no, nobody does that. And now I've run like 12, and I've run 2 ultra marathons. So I'm now that person, and I'm getting close to the age that she was. So I wish that race was still put on so I could talk to a nervous 10-mile and be like, haha, one day you may too write a book about running and write for the New York Times about running. Although I don't plan on giving up the column anytime soon, because it's nice and it's fun. I get to talk to people like you. So at the time, I had been writing a lot of travel about New Jersey, and then I realized that, as fun as it was and as much as I enjoyed it, writing about your vacation spot makes it work. It's not so much fun anymore, and I just wanted to write something bigger, so I saw that running was becoming more popular, and I started pitching stories beyond this little 5K piece, which actually never ran because magazines are strange. They paid me for it, which is sort of important. And I had all the notes, which was great for writing the book. I had all the notes I took for the magazine. So I started writing about being a new runner. And my first story I ever sold to the New York Times about running, because I had been writing for them since 2006, because I just started pitching them and wouldn't, kept giving them ideas until they actually, signed me stuff, was about my first running injury, which I'm in the doctor's office, and I'm really upset because I have the stabbing pain in my hip. And he goes, well, you have gluteus medius tendinosis, also known as dead butt syndrome. And I was like, that's the story. That was the pitch. And I think the headline when your butt is dead. And I pitched it to Runner's World, and they passed on it. And then I pitched it to this new section in the Times at the New York Times called Well, and this was 2010. And Well bought the story, and then that editor at Runner's World was like, we should have bought that story. Do you want to write something else? So that's how I started writing for Runner's World. My friend's husband was the sports editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer. He had run track at a New York college whose name I don't remember, Stony Brook. He ran track at Stony Brook, had played football at Stony Brook, typical middle age, got out of shape, wanted to be in better shape. And I just talked to him for 2 hours about how to start running again. And he called me up and he said, we're going to have a running column. Do you want to write it? And I was like, even though at that point I was writing for any sort of magazine that you've probably ever read. The local newspaper didn't pay that much, but at the same time, you know, it was a paper that I picked up every day since I was 7. So I did that for 3 or 4 years. At that time, I figured I had just run my first marathon, which is the Philly Marathon, because it was here. And I was dating someone who said, you'll run that one. And I went, okay. So you can imagine how that relationship went. And when I eventually moved out of his house, I ran the 2013 New Jersey Marathon, and I ended up writing a story about the breakup marathon, like how you go through something really bad and you run your face off. And I did the Hanson's Marathon Method. They had just published the book on their training method for amateurs, and I was the first journalist to do it, and it is the hardest thing I've ever done. But I won't tell you how that ended because, you know, I don't want to spoil the book for you. But at the same time this book was coming out, I remember I was, my editor from the Inquirer, he's okay. He had a heart attack. And I was just about to resign because the Times, I had continued to write for them, and they knew my book was coming out, and they called me and said, well, we want to excerpt it. And I like dropped the phone. And they said, and we want you to become more involved in our running coverage. And I didn't think I could do both. And then by August of 2017, well, they had already launched a running newsletter, and somebody was writing it who didn't run. I don't know why. I think her intention was she was going to run. She just joined our running club, so I think she's trying again. And then they said, do you want to write it? And I was like, so that was 3 years ago. So I've been doing that now for 3 years. This is the only place I write about running anymore because I have to write 52 columns a year. Multiply that by 3. That's a lot. And I occasionally write for the sports section, although not so much anymore because it's funny. Sometimes they'll take my column and then put it in sports. And I'm like, look at that. Because, you know, there weren't any other sports going on. So sometimes they would just put it word for word. And I'm like, could I update it? Because by the time you run it, that's out of date. And we figured it all out. So I've been working from home for 15 years. So this sort of quarantine thing is not new for me. The last time I was in New York was the end of February because the New York Times Run Club, which I'm going to point to this shirt a lot because I like it and because we can't wear it in races. We do group runs on Wednesday nights, and I would come up from South Jersey. I take the train from Philly and meet all my editors in person and say hi, and then go running, and then either stay overnight or go home really sweaty. And I remember my editor saying, okay, well, we'll see you in June for the next media race. And I'd already started writing about the testing failures since I'm a freelancer. I write for a bunch of people. I write for Clinical Laboratory News. And I said, I don't know about that. And so here we are. It's been a weird year. I mean, it's a weird year for everybody. I didn't realize that it was Boston Marathon week when it happened because I had already sort of assumed it wasn't happening. I remember watching the trials. We have a runner bar down here. The guy who owns our local running store also owns a bar called The Mile. So we watched the trials there, and I thought, I really think this is all we're going to get. People were like, oh, you're overreacting. And here we are. That was interesting because at the end of the marathon, a pub crawl came in. And they seemed really mad that Atlanta was shut down for this race. I was like, ugh. Anyway, so the way we've been covering things is I write sometimes about what I'm doing, what I'm seeing. I read a lot of studies that come out and reports about how races are doing. Run sign up, which I'm sure you've probably encountered at some point to sign up for a race, is thinking we're not going to get normal racing back till 2022. Which I tend to agree with. Although I am signed up for a race on my calendar's over there. August 16th, like a very small trail race that they said they're capping at 225 people, and it's in Pennsylvania, in a county that is green right now. So, and I'm signed up for a race the Sunday of Labor Day weekend called Labor Pains. That's why it's called Labor Pains. And it's 12 hours, and you have that amount of time to run as many loops in the woods as you can, which I have done twice. I've done it to hit a milestone distance, and I've stopped. This year I might actually take a nap, which you can do, and then keep running. I've talked a lot. Is this interesting at all? Like what do you do? Should I answer questions?
Yeah, so I have some questions. So if you want to take some right now, I can.
Yeah, I see the chat here, but you go ahead. I'll shut the chat down so I can't see it. I'll be surprised.
So this is from Janet Gottlieb. She writes, having read the book, I'm wondering if what, if any, feedback you've gotten from the people you wrote about, especially the exes.
All right, let me remember their fake names. Nick was the last one, the one that I had lived with. I actually interviewed him as I was writing the book. He's the only one who would do it. And, you know, he came over to my house and sat down, and I gave him a beer because, you know, and I said, why was I a terrible girlfriend? And that was hard for a lot of reasons, but he said that he didn't read it. And I actually believe him because sometimes I still talk to him, and I do not believe he would talk to me. I was actually invited to his wedding, which I was like, oh God, no. The other two, the middle one, whose fake name I don't remember, lives in the Midwest. I know that he saw it because the Wall Street Journal did a big story on running books. And if you have a good author headshot, you're more likely to get featured. And my picture was a quarter of the page of the Wall Street Journal on the back cover of the A or the B section. So I know he saw it. I didn't hear anything. The first one, the MySpace guy, I know that they saw it because we used to work together. And like, you have to change identifying details about people. And I did change identifying details about him. And, you know, I know that he saw it, and there was some backlash, but whatever. I got to write about him in the New York Times, so I win.
So what made you decide to put the book in this particular structure where, you know, every chapter starts off with talking about the New Jersey Marathon and then doing a flashback?
So if you want to write a book, usually you have to write a book proposal. And the book proposal, the book was half written by the time I sold it, but it was in a different format. It was in straight chronological order from me being a whiny kid who didn't want to run laps to get ready for soccer season to this New Jersey Marathon. And I had a male runner and a female non-runner read the book as I was writing it, because I knew that this book was going to be pitched towards women runners. And both of them said, independently of each other, they've never met, you need to get to the running sooner, because I don't care about all this backstory. Like, it's interesting, but like, this is a running book. They're going to want to see you run. And I was like, fine, start the book with it. So the way the book starts is at the starting line of the 2013 New Jersey Marathon, me being anxious about it because I've done this whole training plan, and if it doesn't work, like, what did I just do? I'm a failure. I mean, you learn that later. But, you know, before any race, like, I'm a nervous person before a race, which is sometimes if I'm in a race and I get recognized, like, people want to talk to me. Sometimes I don't, if I'm wearing a New York Times shirt, that's totally fine. If I'm not, I'd prefer to be left alone because I'm like grumpy and mean. I'm not mean to people. I don't like yell at you. I don't yell at people if they come up to me. But I'm just like not in a good headspace because I'm nervous. So, and the other thing about this marathon, 2013 New Jersey Marathon, was it was in May of 2013. Sandy had been in October of 2012, which I was still writing about the Jersey Shore. And this was held in the North Jersey Shore, which was like, there were whole blocks that were bulldozed because of damage from Sandy. And it was 3 weeks after the Boston Marathon bombing. So that race it definitely stuck out in a place in time. And it's funny because my first 2 books were about New Jersey, and I swore I was not going to write a book about New Jersey. I ended up writing a book about New Jersey. So that was sort of the structure. I had read the book Wild at some point before all this, and I met Cheryl Strait in an event, and she sort of does that back and forth with her hike on the Pacific Crest Trail. And then I read, of all things, Eat, Pray, Love, and she does the same thing. And I was like, oh, well, this is how I should structure my book. And that's the way that it ended up.
And this question is also, again, from Janet. She wants to know if you had done one of our Al Goldstein races.
I haven't. I'm sorry. I did an event with the Brooklyn Running Company, but that's it. I'm sorry.
Well, you are invited to come when we have them for real again live. So hopefully sometime soon. I'm really hoping we're not going to be prohibited from having real races until 2022.
I think that run sign up report was more about like the giant races, because
Okay.
small races are still happening. There were 2 out in Utah where you had a 10-minute block you could pick, and you started in the 10-minute block. So the staggered start thing is working pretty well, it seems. But like the New York City Marathon, in the format we all know it, you know.
This question is from Alexis. She wants to know if your mother is still running after you guys did your marathon together.
Yes. So last year, I wrote a 4-part series about my mother, who ran her first marathon at 65 years old. She graduated high school the month that Title IX was enacted. She was not allowed to run in high school because she was a girl. So in 2013, actually, it is in this book a little bit. She had done running and not running. She'd done biking and swimming, but she wanted to do triathlons, but she knew her run was bad. And she went to the running store where I shop and bought shoes and made them all swear they wouldn't tell me, because she was worried that if it didn't work out, she would be embarrassed. But she came to a lot of my races and she said, Jenny, none of you all are allowed to call me Jenny. She can, because she's my mother. I saw people who looked like me. And since 2013 to last year, she lost 60 pounds. She's done more sprint triathlons than I can count. She got her first 5K, she finished last. Like, I had to hold the timer, like tell them not to pack up and leave, because she was still out there. I think she's got her PR down by 12 minutes or something ridiculous like that. She has a coach. I don't even have a coach right now. So she entered the lottery and got in. And I told her that if she was going to run the New York City Marathon, I would run with her. We did one training. We ran a 5K. We've run 5Ks together. We did one training run together. We did the New York Roadrunners 18-mile run in Central Park. And once she did that, I knew she would be fine. It took her 7.5 hours. My feet have never hurt that much at the end of a race. It was just fast enough that I couldn't walk, and just slow enough. Like, it was in that middle. I felt like I should have been race walking, and my hips weren't up for that. She is still running. She's done a couple virtual races. She is really glad she didn't defer to this year, because she thought about it and I wouldn't let her. She was 64. She turned 65 right after the race. And she's doing good. I mean, she's dealing with quarantine the same way we all are. She also is 65 years old. So she's technically high risk. I remember her going out for a run and it being so crowded in the park, she came home and started crying that people were trying to breathe on her and kill her. And I said, well, why are you running in the park? Go run that way where people don't run. So we actually just this is before before masks and like everything. I write about science, and like the frustration of the advice keeps changing. I'm like, well, we keep understanding more. But yeah, she's still running. I would watch her read the columns on Saturday morning because she would not ask to read them first. I would sort of tell her what I was going to write about. I think the most popular in the series was about that 18-mile run because my grandmother, my dad's mother, had just died 2 days before. And there was no funeral, no service, no nothing. Not because of COVID, this is before then, obviously, but because that's how his family was. And I had to go to New York and run this hot 18 miles, and I was angry. But it was just about how that whole thing went. So she's doing well. I'll tell her y'all said hi. She's a good lady.
So I'm going to ask Catherine's questions first because it segues nicely with what you've been talking about. Ashley, I see your question. It will come up afterwards. So Catherine's question, she writes, I love your write-up about running with your mom. Do you feel that it is too personal? How do you balance that, like having privacy while still keeping it authentic?
So I would never write anything to embarrass her. I was actually worried about the marathon, about if something went wrong, but nothing went wrong. So I was like, well, what the hell am I going to write about? It was perfect. I had been approached to write a book about my mother, and I have said no, because I've written about myself a lot. If I write a book about my mother, I'm going to open her and people in my family up to stuff that they probably don't want to share because my parents are divorced. And that was what I know a lot of people want me to write another book, and I do too, but that's definitely not the book to write. I mean, my dad's like, write a book about me, and I'm like, not until you're dead. So that is, and I talked to my mom about it, and I said, I don't want to write a book about you. And she's like, why don't we not? I think if it had been a longer series, we probably could have strung them together. But I also wrote about my mom in ESPNW a couple years ago and told a little bit more, like pulling out the yearbook and looking at all the photos of all the sports teams and where the girls weren't. But that was sort of it. Just, I would never embarrass my mother, and I would not write a book about her while she's still alive.
This is from Ashley. You mentioned in a recent column that this summer, with the races being canceled, you are reconsidering the role that the cycle of training and racing has in your life. Would you talk us through some of your thoughts on that? And she, in parentheses, speaking as someone who is speaking through the same issues.
So the other part of that, and I don't know if I put it in that column, is that I suffered a stress fracture. I cracked my tibia, not tibia, yeah, shin bone. In Valentine's Day, 2018, I got the diagnosis that I cracked my leg. And I haven't written too much about what happened because I feel like in the position of the New York Times, if I quote unquote dunk on someone, it's punching down because it is a very popular newsletter. And then when the stories also run online, it gets a lot more exposure. I was overcoached. I had run a 50K in October and then ran the Philly Marathon. It was my 10th marathon. And I thought, that would be nice to run my 10th where I ran my first. And I kept telling him that the training was too much. I needed a break. And he said, no, you're fine. You can handle it. And then I break my leg. And then he blamed me. So that was hard because not only did I have to deal with losing this thing that was such a big part of my life, but then this coach blamed me for it and told me, first of all, that I didn't know how to talk to doctors, which that's like what I do for a living. And then, anyway. So that was also part of, I was out, I ran again for the first time in May of 2018. And then I drove to Death Valley and back. I actually drove to Death Valley and then Disneyland, California. So there's not much time to run. And then I cracked my leg in 2019. Sorry, I'm getting us all confused. And then back in the summer, I drove to Colorado and spent some time in Fraser and Boulder running at altitude, but not running very well. And I had gained a bunch of weight from being hurt. And I was also on medication that I gained a bunch of weight. So my running was fraught. And so I ran the New York City Marathon with my mother, which again, it's 7.5 hours. Like it was just about being on your feet. And then I decided, well, once I recover from that, cause it hurt, like it really did a number on my legs and my feet. I started training seriously again in January and I just couldn't get the oomph to go. And then, pandemic breaks out. I start having panic attacks. you know, you write about, I don't live in New York City. Obviously, I know that the situation is really different, but I live in New Jersey, which sort of dovetailed on that. You know, and I'm writing about this every day. I try to reach a good work-life balance as a freelancer. I only work about 30 hours a week because I don't have to deal with like management and all that stuff. But I was working about 60 hours a week covering death. And it was really tough. So, and I was still trying to run and hit mileage marks and do speed workouts. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing? So, you know, I'm rethinking it. And it's funny because my mileage has really been building up lately because I sort of went back into therapy. We're all going to have a kumbaya session here, a different medication, and have, you know, I'm still a person trying to live through a global pandemic, but, you know, I just can go run for an hour in the morning and be fine. You know, I don't really enjoy racing all the time. Sometimes I think it's a lot of stuff that I like, getting anxious about races and getting upset if I miss a training run. A bunch of years ago, I interviewed Michael Palin of Monty Python, who has never run a race in his life and is a lifetime runner. And he's like, why? And I'm like, oh, that's a good point. So, you know, part of it is just that I felt like I lost control of my body because of this injury that I was, you know, then there was all this other stuff of being blamed for it, even though I kept saying like, I can't do this anymore. And then, you know, and the pandemic hits and people are dying. Like I knew so many people who were sick at the same time that I had a spreadsheet, and 4 people in my family had it at the same time. Extended family, cousins, uncle, his wife. I'm rambling. I'm sorry. So anyway, without races, like I'm signed up for this labor pains race, which I've run twice before, and I'm very excited to do again, but I'm not trying to beat my 50K PR or even run 50K. I just want to go out and hang out in the woods with a bunch of weirdos where the course is marked. And if I fall, there's an ambulance at the finish line. So, you know, I enjoy spending more time in the woods than I probably do road racing. And, you know, I have no tattoos, so I probably won't ever be a big ultra marathoner, but there was a 12-hour race held not far from where I live, and I'm pointing because it was over that way, on Saturday, and it was a 3.72 mile loop that everybody runs here all the time. And it was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And the race director said, do you want to run it? I was like, there's no shade on that. I'd rather run technical trails for 12 hours where there's shade. But I just brought out my water bottle and a cowbell, and I just, every time I saw someone with a bib, you know, rang the cowbell. And somebody actually looked at me and she goes, I don't hate cowbells right now. That's how much I've missed racing. So, you know, that sort of experience of just being with other runners is something I'm rethinking. I've rambled a lot. Do you have another question? I'm sorry.
What kind of I mean, so how, what type of runner do you, like see yourself as? Like, you don't see yourself as a competitive road racer, like, you know, so like, what is your identity as a runner? And sort of, I'm also curious, like, do you belong to a running club where you live?
I hate the term hobby jogger, but I'm just not competitive at this moment. I don't know if I'll ever be. I think I worry that 50K, where I actually PR'd by over an hour, and it was in October, and when I finished, it was 83 degrees. And it was a tough technical course, and it was hot. And I think that really might have done me in because of what it did to my body, and that training did. I'm a recreational runner who happens to get paid to write about it. Does that make sense? I know a lot about running. Obviously, I've been writing about it for a long time. I was on a dating app where somebody matched with me, and he goes, I know who you are. I don't need to ask you any questions because I know you. And then he proceeded to tell me what races I should run.
That sounds a little creepy.
I've had some creepy moments. I had someone at Strava. I don't use Strava. I write about cybersecurity, and I don't use Strava. I don't have smart stuff in my house. And he started asking other people on my running club if I was going to be at an event, and said we knew each other and working on a story together, and we weren't. And I said, and Strava's like, oh, it's just a misunderstanding. He's just a fan. That was really creepy. So I still don't use Strava. I am on the New York Times Run Club, which I only live about an hour, 15-minute train ride from New York City. Once I get into Philadelphia, and I can see Philadelphia from my house most of the time. I was part of the South Jersey Athletic Club, but I found, I think, what I was looking for in the Times Running Club. I am on one Slack channel, and that's the Slack channel I'm on. And I like that sort of we're at all different abilities, all different ages, all over the country, because the New York Times, actually all over the world, we have international members because the New York Times is an international company. It's just sort of the rah-rah support that I could use. And then, you know, at the time where we could run in person, we did. So right now we have 2 challenges going on. Every month they reset, either run 100K or 100 miles. And then we get a prize, which is kind of exciting. I mean, it's not like, it's like one of these. I didn't win. They just mailed these with my shirt. But it's fun. Like, you know, when I'm training a lot, 100 miles a month is not a big deal for me, but right now it sort of is. And you could see people like really pushing to get to their mark. And I ran a 3-hour race on Saturday, however far you can, 2 Saturdays ago. And then I was like, I have enough mileage. And so last week I didn't have to run that much, but I'm like, but I gotta get to 100 miles or else they're going to be disappointed. So that's fun. Okay.
Do we have any more questions for Jen?
You want to see my dog?
Yes.
Oh, she might be hiding because thunderstorms. Also, my porch is being renovated right now, so there are a lot of things out of place. I think she is hiding because of the storm. I have a little cattle dog who I adopted on a road trip. I took the summer of 2017 to see the 18 states I hadn't been to yet. And I picked up a dog in Idaho and brought her home. Oh, where is she? Hold on. Okay. I tore my house. She is, okay. Oh, there she is. Hold on. With my running shoes. Hi.
Oh.
That is Annie Oakley Tater Tot. That is her name. So she likes to run off leash with me, which we can't really do here. We go to a big wooded dog park where she can, and when we're in Colorado, which is where I was supposed to be right now, you can run off leash in certain mountains, and we have a blast. Sorry.
No, so that actually segues nicely to our next question. So this is from Alexis and Nate. So Alexis wants to know if you've done a run in every state, and Nate wants to know how many different states have you done a race in?
So I have not run in all states because part of the problem with that was I went to Alaska in 2013 after I ran this marathon and had tendinosis in my foot. So I was in an air cast. So I was like, my college roommate at the time lived in Anchorage. So she had all these like trail runs planned. And that's a good question. I don't track that, but I've run races in Colorado. I ran the 4th of July Independence Day race in Denver. I ran a women's race in Boise, Idaho, actually 2 days before I got the dog. And the course was short, so it's my best 10K time ever. I've run in Hawaii. I've run in Montana. I've run in South Dakota. I ran a race in Oklahoma at a Mustang ranch, Rowdy's Mustang Ranch, where it was an ultra marathon. Like, it was a loop course. You could run a bunch of stuff. And I was signed up, I think, for the 30K. And it was the first time I dropped out of a race because I had been driving, I think, for a month by then. And I was just exhausted and didn't do the next loop. And the female timer was like, oh, yeah, I totally understand. The male's like, come on, you can do it. And she's like, no. This was a race where they had shots of Fireball at the aid stations. But it was on a Mustang ranch, which was pretty cool. And the stuff they gave you, instead of a shirt, it was a bandana, which I now carry with me when I run, and a pen to a gun shop. So that was Oklahoma. I've run a lot in Florida too because I go back all the time.
This question is from Ashley. She wants to know if you have any personal running heroes.
Oh, I did a story for ESPNW a couple years ago about Bobby Gibb, who I'm friends with Catherine Switzer. She was the first woman to officially run the Boston Marathon, but Bobby ran it the year before. Catherine gave her initials so they would give her a bib. Bobby just popped out of the bushes and ran it. And she's a person. She's a scientist. She's an artist. She's actually making a bronze that is going to go along the Boston Marathon route, I believe. It's the first woman that will be on the route. And she just, like, the way the story opened was she would run in boys' shoes and a bathing suit. Like when she ran Boston, she wore nursing shoes, and you shouldn't try new stuff the day before a race. One day her husband at the time was in the Navy. So she just was like in San Diego and ran to Mexico. And then when she came back, the tide was up, so she couldn't. She got held by immigration. I would just look her up. She's a really interesting person. I can't say someone is a hero if I could potentially cover them because that's an ethics. But I will say I get along really well with Des Linden. Even though she didn't like the story that I wrote about her, I wouldn't say that. I wrote a piece about her before one of the marathons, the one after she won Boston, before she ran New York, and she had just left Hanson, and I asked her why I heard she left Hanson's, and she hated that I asked the question. But nobody else asked her. But that's the New York Times. Like, that's my job, right? And so we did an event with Lindsay Krause that Monday after the marathon. It was me, her, Ali Kiefer, Stephanie Bruce. And I thought she was mad at me. And it turned out her and Stephanie had just gotten back from the bar and they were kind of drunk. So she's cool. I would love to ghostwrite her book, but I think she's going to write it herself. So if she writes a book. So, yeah.
So there's we have time for just one more question. So will be the last one and we'll wrap up. So this is from Nate. He wants to know, what do you think the next big change or evolution in running will be?
Oh God, getting back to running. I think that we're going to lose a lot of the smaller races. Just any for-profit races, I think, are really struggling. I don't know. Ironman and Rock and Roll are up for sale again. I was writing for the Inquirer when Rock and Roll pretty much told pros they weren't going to pay them anymore, which they reversed. That's a whole long story. I think virtual races are going to continue to have a place whenever we can run in real life again. And maybe more people will get into ultra marathoning or trail running because those races are still happening, and it's sort of they're generally smaller, and it's much easier to social distance. There was a race on the rock. It's called On the Rocks. It was in York, PA, that I ran in 2016. It was already 3 different starts for 3 different distances, and I ran for 5 hours and saw no one. They canceled it this year because someone in the race director's family got sick with COVID. So, unfortunately. But, races are going to look different. Get used to running with hydration packs because I think that the open aid stations are not going to be there for a while. I think they're going to be run with a lot less volunteers. Finish lines will be different. You probably won't have someone put metal over your neck for a while. Of course, some blockbuster treatment or vaccine could change all of this. It'll be interesting to see if the Olympics are still going to happen next year. But I think people are discovering that there is value in virtual races. The first time I ever wrote about virtual races, it was pretty much because people are like, what the hell is the point? And I think people are seeing that there is a point. So I think they will continue in some sort of capacity once, we get back to more traditional racing.
All right. Jen, thank you so much for coming to speak with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. And watching as I wandered around my house looking for my dog, which I have to go try to walk her in the storm. So tomorrow's going to be, anyway. All right. I'm going to bow out. So thank you so much. And one more plug if you want to buy it. No, it's fine. You don't have to buy it. Borrow it from the library with
if you have not read this book, you should definitely read it. It's a wonderful memoir. I read this a few years ago, and I picked it up this weekend to reread it. And it has, in the rereading, it has not. I just loved it, and it hasn't lost any of its pleasure, even though reading it again for the second time. And I am not someone that enjoys rereading or rewatching things. So that just tells you about the power of good writing.
I've heard it goes really fast. I couldn't tell you because it took me long enough to write it that I can't read it again. So, all right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye.